Okay. Good day, Dr. Mantz. How are you?
Hey, how are you, Jim Cleveland? How are you?
Okay, so we're back for our second in this series of mental wellness during times of crisis and pandemic. And I think we got some good feedback and follow-up questions from the first call. So I'm really excited to be here with you and do this again.
Yeah, I'm excited too. We got a lot of positive feedback and a lot from the first responders, like police officers and medical community and all that stuff. So I feel that this is a unique opportunity if I can be of any way, and you yourself too, being a lay person, kind of just seeing it from your perspective. I think it'd be helpful for both of us to kind of like chomp on some of the issues that people are suffering from, or challenges that people are facing, and coming up with ways to make it easier for them.
Yep, and there's definitely more than enough stress and problems to go around. I figured I'd just start with like a little bit from like my point of view and my situation. So I am a layperson. I'm not in the medical field. My background is in tech. So I've been a product manager at tech companies, and we're currently in Australia. So I've been traveling a bit, and we're ending a 14-day quarantine. So we've been in the house here. That was a condition for entering the country. So everyone who entered had to stay in quarantine. So we've been mostly sane through that lockdown. And when we get out, I don't think it's going to change too much for us. So we're going to be here until May, and also like dealing with all of these issues and stresses that come up when you're just basically in self-isolation. And today is my like help with coronavirus day. So I have this interview with you, and the other thing I'm working on is I'm helping review submissions for a COVID-19 global hackathon. So in the tech world, obviously the thing to do to help is to start building lots of apps. And so I'm helping sorting through like all of these, super inspiring and sometimes terrible apps that, can help with this crisis in some way. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so like let's kick it off. Today we have some topics on follow-ups on the health category, relationships, and different scenarios coming up with work. So like just to kick it off.
Before we start, Jim, I just highlight though, just to try to be, what we're trying to do here obviously is to be helpful, and but in that sense, I might be giving certain types of suggestions, but it's not be medical advice of any sort. Obviously, I don't know any particular person, if you have any medical conditions. This is sort of the disclaimer, but the way I might answer these questions is the way I might answer with a particular client. That may not be particularly for the viewer themselves. They may have certain, like I said, medical conditions that where what I suggest may not apply. So just keep that in mind. But what we're trying to do is just really educate and then be smart with the information that you get.
Very important to add that there. Yeah, thanks. So the one of the follow-ups on the health from last time, and I think this really like hit the heart of a lot of people. You said no alcohol because they get back to sleep.
Such a bastard.
So what exactly do you mean by no alcohol? Can you elaborate on limits that might not affect sleep, like something around amounts, or just how if people they still want to have a drink, how can they go about that in a healthy way?
Sure. It's one of the things I recommend for most people. There's an awesome Audible book, Why Do We Sleep by Matthew Walker. So I'm also wanting to promote what I feel are really powerful information sources that could be helpful. And he goes into this in great detail. He dedicated his life to sleep. He's a PhD in it. And his final words was, abstinence, not something that most people want to hear because of the evidence that we see. And so just to reiterate quickly why he came up with that conclusion, and that is because based on the studies that we've shown is that even little bits of alcohol, what it does is it lasts in the body for on average, it depends on each person, the half-life is about 4 to 4.5 hours, but again that depends on a couple other factors, but just take that for what it is. So if you're coming home from work and it's pretty late and then you're having some alcohol at that point, it's not as much of a problem in the first half of sleep, but it's mainly in the second half when we have more of that REM sleep. And REM sleep is really critical, especially for calibrating our emotional circuitry. It's extremely important for, in particular, our kind of flight and flight emotions, our fear and our anger. And we definitely need those to be well calibrated, especially those who are first responders, because you're going through some pretty difficult situations and you got to make some quick judgment calls. And this is also a unique situation where you can't just be like aggressive, because if you have people who have or infected with this particular COVID-19 issue, then like, what do you do in that situation? You can't just go gangbusters in there. You have to use your mental faculties. And so because this is going to be more like a marathon, if we do these things, like if you had like 1 or 2 days where you're going to have a drink or so, I mean, obviously, and you're just so kind of wound up and you're going to do that. Well, what you want to do is start as far away from sleep as possible. I'm not going to give any particular recommendation, but it'd be like, you just do it as far away as possible when you're done with your shift, as little as you can. And this would be a harm reduction approach. There's also a couple things when I used to work in the different clinics working with people with reducing alcohol, a couple herbs that I sometimes use, again, using that caveat, but with like, one of them that I would use often is valerian root, and it depends on the brand. The one I currently recommend for my clients is called the Oregon's Wild Harvest. That has GABA activity, which is where alcohol works on in the brain, is GABA, which is a calming receptor. It calms down. That's why we drink it, so it brings us down a little bit a notch. I also use a little bit of kava. Now, you do have to be careful where you get your kava. So it's just a pure root, because there were some issues with some liver toxicity on that as well. But some kava, and I use sometimes what's called Kona kava extract. The 12% tincture max is one I will sometimes use, which will help some people, which can give them a little bit of a calm. So I usually use a combination of valerian and kava to kind of provide some of that, little more of that kind of calming effect, and but not getting to become problematic by hurting your REM sleep, which, as we said, it hurts your emotional ability to, and also what also they found is people who have less REM sleep, when they see faces the next day, and they give them a spectrum of faces where going from positive to more neutral faces to more negative, people who get less and less REM sleep will look at the neutral faces and think that they're negative, which could lead to a whole host of problems, especially when you're on the front lines and dealing with situations where you have to make that judgment call. So it's like those kind of things. So using some substitution, and also just using some wisdom. And just one quick thing on that, because I know a lot of people are still going to use it. So what I want to offer is a couple of suggestions, and that is, like, if you keep, using it, you want to sense into your body, if like you're noticing you're getting more irritable when you're waking up, you're starting to feel more tired, and you're just not kind of like getting yourself going. It's hard to initiate behaviors. If you're starting to interpret people in a negative way, and then also just sense into your body. And if you just listen to it and just notice what it actually feels like even right now while you're listening to this video, if you just sense your body and just ask yourself, what level of vitality am I feeling in my body? What's my energy level at this point? And how balanced do I feel right now? And if you're noticing, if you don't bullshit yourself with what you're receiving in your body, so that's the great thing. Instead of listening to this, if you listen to your body, it won't bullshit you, and you can use it as a guide to navigate through some of these behaviors. So I just want to cap it off on that.
Yeah, I quit drinking recently, and that feedback from the body was really important to me. Even after one drink in the morning, I could feel a little bit more tired, a little bit more almost like I could feel it in the throat. And I've noticed since I've stopped, even just 1 or 2 drinks, it's completely cleared up. So even a small alcohol can make a big difference in how you feel. And so like the valerian root and the kava, these are drinks that like kind of like tinctures or extracts that you would have in place of having a drink.
So valerian is in a capsule, and you have to use I use these specific brands, and there's other good ones as well. And just to let you know, I don't have any investments in any of these companies. These are just ones that I've vetted out over time, but things do change over time. But I found that particular brand, the Oregon's Wild Harvest, to be a decent brand that you can try. That's a capsule. The other one's in a tincture, which is like a little dropper. And it's and then you can just put it and drop it in your mouth with a little bit of water, hold it, swish it back, and utilize that. And that I found to be pretty helpful. There's also, you can have it in a tea form as well. There's some, and get like the higher end stuff, not the cheap stuff and this kind of thing, so that you can get a little bit of a slight euphoria, kind of sedating kind of quality as well, but it doesn't really disturb as much of the REM sleep, and allows you to kind of get you that segue. The other thing too is to ask yourself, why is the strong desire for the alcohol in that particular instance. And if you're drinking it daily, then you're no longer using it recreationally, you're using it now medicinally. And there's many other things that are medicinal that don't have the side effects of alcohol and the detrimental effects overall that you can use in lieu of. And in that case too, you can also work with a doctor. And oftentimes we'll use sometimes we will use some medications in that case, depending upon the use of alcohol. And obviously, if you're using a lot, you don't want to just cut down. You want to make sure that you work with the professional in that regard. But there are also different medicines. I don't really recommend the benzos because they too have the same problem with inhibiting REM sleep. Ambien too also has that effect as well at inhibiting REM sleep. So, looking to other natural means and other solutions through people who understand these principles as well.
Yeah, thanks. The other follow-up we had was about sleep. So I've been noticing for myself, my sleep's often interrupted where I'm waking up after a few hours. And I think we also had some of the first responders who, maybe they work a night shift and they have to go to sleep at a, not usual time for them, 7, 8 a.m. in the morning, but they're finding that they're waking up at noon. Are there any tips on like how to manage and like maintain a deep sleep, even when you have to go to bed at a, early time in the morning?
So the big thing on this is obviously there's two main things that bring us into sleep, and that's two. One is your circadian rhythm, and that's the biggest factor that regulates that is the light-dark cycle. So when there's bright light, you have like melatonin in your brain, which initiates, kind of coordinates all your brain centers to go to sleep. When you encounter bright light, that turns the melatonin and breaks it down as a signal. It's like, oh, it's daytime, time to get up. It breaks the melatonin back into serotonin, which is important for well-being and emotional regulation. So the light-dark cycle is where we would use to try to get, and so like if all of a sudden you shift your sleep, that's a major stressor. There's just no way around that. It takes about 7 days at the very minimum to get some recuperation if you switch your hours, a full 180 switch in that regard. So you really want to allow yourself to kind of like, it's going to be a little bit tough, but what you can use is one of these, I recommend these artificial lights. There are these, what they call the seasonal affective disorder usually used, but they're used very effectively for shift work as well. So what you would do is that when you wake up, you would use this bright light. We recommend, one of the companies I recommend is Viralux. You can get it on Amazon.com. They have a 10,000 lux. That's a measurement of brightness. If you get too low, you have to stay there for too long, but generally about 20 to 30 minutes of bright light. And you don't have to look directly at it. It just needs to get in towards the retina, but not looking directly at it. And that will stimulate the brain and tells the brain, oh, it's morning time. So let's say you just shifted into a night shift. Then when you first get up, when you're ready to do that first shift, hit yourself with some of that bright light for about 20 to 30 minutes. And if possible, if you can do it with your other kind of coworkers as well, you could even bring it in there. There's been studies where, because one of the issues is also how people are more accident prone when they do shift work. And oftentimes a lot of these accidents, it's not really up to you. Your body after a while, when it gets so tired, you're going to fall into these things like micro sleeps, they call. In fact, there are more deaths in automobile accidents caused by sleepiness and micro sleeps than there are all the drugs and alcohol combined. So what we want to do is just get that brightness to kind of kick in. If you're going to use caffeine, use it then in the very beginning, about 250, 300 milligrams, if you can tolerate it, or less. In that case, is done prior to. Eat your biggest meal before you work as well. So that way, as you go through your day, and then you can eat another meal about 3 or 4 hours if possible, and try to eat things that are easy to digest, because that takes a lot of energy for the body. And shifting your work takes a lot of stress, and your body doesn't process calories very well when it disturbs your metabolic function. That's why people who do shift work tend to have more prone to diabetes and things like that. So limiting your refined carbohydrates, making things very easy. Shakes are a really good idea during that kind of thing, where it's just like you make a whole shake and then you just sip it throughout. And then as you get closer to the evening, you want to just make it smaller meals, and try to like even get to a kind of more of a fasted state if you can tolerate that. And when you go to bed, and if you're just feeling like you need a little bit of something high in fat, like some nuts and seeds or something like that, that will give you like slow burning energy into the night. And then to answer that question with waking up a little bit earlier, first you have to really manage your light, like use like blackout curtains, or they have these like sleep masks. Like I have one here, I can demonstrate for you, is like this thing. And what's special about these, it has like a space where you can open your eyes and you get complete darkness, as opposed to just laying flat.
Rob Michael's house while they can't see.
And so you want to get it dark as possible, and then get to sleep, and that will help turn on your melatonin. Using melatonin is helpful here as well, anywhere from 0.5 milligrams up to 5 milligrams for people. If you tend to wake up early, you want to use a time release form, and you take it about an hour before bed. You may even want to take it a little bit earlier before bed, especially if you're really revved up, just to kind of let your body kind of enter into a sleep, and use a ritual to kind of, because I remember when I was doing night float, when I was on there and struggling with that, it's not easy when you're doing that kind of work. And what I had to do first was, because I had so much energy in my body, I couldn't just relax. I had to do something that was stimulating first. So I made a playlist for myself of just songs. Sometimes when I'm done, I was exhausted and I just want to hear something more soothing. But other times I'm like, I can feel the energy in my body, so I'd want something more intense.
Yeah. Okay, so Michael, just to recap on the improving sleep and managing night shifts, it seems like it's a lot about managing your environment, especially light, right, and then also managing intake and the timing of intake into the body.
Exactly. And the two supplements that I use a lot with my clients in this regard are melatonin, like I said, the time release. And then another one is another tincture called Deep Sleep by a company called Herbs ETC. It's a combination of different herbs like valerian, passion flower. And why I like the tincture, especially what happens is many people get what's called fragmented sleep during this time, meaning they can fall asleep initially, but then they pop up again 2 to 3 hours. That's because the circadian rhythm is still thrown off, even though your body's exhausted. It's popping you back up. So to give that person a little more, something to help them fall back asleep, a little nudge. I like using Deep Sleep because, unlike a pill, which takes about 45, 50 minutes for your body to absorb and feel, a tincture, if you hold it in your mouth, especially if it has a little bit, it's based in alcohol, will be absorbed fairly rapidly, sometimes within 15 minutes. And it just gives you a little bit more nudge to kind of fall back asleep so that you can defragment your sleep and get greater continuity. Cool. And I think there was also a question in regards to maybe having to go to the bathroom oftentimes at night as well. And that would just want to address that. Is obviously the basic thing is trying not to drink fluids an hour before bed. If you do, maybe putting even a little bit of salt, as long as you don't have any higher blood pressure, which will help you retain it a little bit longer. And ultimately, a lot of times that's a stress dump that happens as well. If that's happening, if that doesn't normally happen to you, that can normally happen. But allowing yourself to just kind of relax about it and come back to sleep, using certain strategies, whether it's listening to certain like music or something like that, that helps you to make that fragmentation less and allow you to fall asleep easier.
There's like calming music before you go to sleep, that type of thing.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So let's shift gears and let's talk about managing relationships. So many of us are sheltered in place or in self-isolation, except the self-isolation is with partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse. And it's not easy to spend that much time with the partner for any of us. And certainly, feel it here in Australia. What are your main areas of guidance for helping negotiate relationships when we're so close together for more often than we would normally be?
Yeah, I think you hit it. The word that you used that was beautiful is negotiate. And it is a negotiating, and it's an evolving and negotiating. You may come up with sort of certain rules, and then they're going to be broken over time. And so it's really important that you maybe set up some times in which the you and your partner kind of meet up. Perhaps like the times when your kind of energy is at your best before all basically the shit is hitting the fan, and then you're feeling kind of irritable, and then you're less likely to be able to negotiate in a way that's optimal. So maybe you find some times that work for both of you, whether it's like 11 a.m., whether you want to, it's kind of fun if you kind of make this like a little playful, like you'd be like our 11 a.m. briefing or our 7 p.m. briefing or our check-in or whatever kind of words that you want to use, euphemisms and things like that, being playful about it, I think could really bring, just lighten the mood up a little bit. And I think that's an overall strategy that I think I'll go into in some other time about the importance of play and bringing that into all of this so that we don't get too rigid and tight with each other. I think that's one. The other one is is when you're trying to renegotiate like boundaries with each other, when your emotions are high, that's not the time to negotiate. That's the time to just give each other space, let your emotional intensity come down. So giving you a principle, I brought it up last time, but think about this. It's called the SUDS, subjective units of distress. And that's the intensity part of our emotions. So it's like a 0 to 10, 10 being the most you could ever feel, and then 0 being none at all. And we learn best between intensity levels of 2 and 7. If you're above a 7, there's no way you're highly reactive or your partner are highly reactive. You can have the most cogent, logical, brilliant argument in the world, and it's not going to land the way you think it is if that person is above a 7 in a particular type of emotion. So it's recognizing that, being able to then negotiate, like, all right, hey, I notice we're both kind of like a little bit intense right now. Why don't we take a time out? We'll come back in an hour and we'll see where we are. Now, you may not be down below a 7 after an hour, but being honest with each other, because you're not in control of that situation, but you're learning to kind of how to like create the time optimally so that you can negotiate new things. And a line from like a book, a famous psychotherapist, and Irving Yalom said, "Strike when the iron is cold rather than hot." And it's a really good thing to remind yourself when you're in a relationship. Like you want to kind of get the edge in someone, like you're getting irritable, and you can see the other person's getting a little bit irritable, and you want to, it's like tit for tat, like bing bang, going back and forth. You could feel it. Like, strike when the iron is cold, meaning, well, let's wait till everything kind of settles down, because we're going to be together for a while. and so we need to learn to negotiate that space and do so in with wisdom. And also, we're going to make, quote unquote, mistakes, all of us. I mean, there's times when I will blow up and, do things like that. I mean, it's normal. It's a human thing. And also, one other thing I'd like to add on there is that because we're all stressed, we kind of know we're kind of getting a little snippy at times, and all that is to give ourselves a little bit of leeway, and to also recognize it's not always to take it personally. I know it's hard to sometimes hear, but it is true in times that, like, if you're feeling kind of like you haven't been getting good sleep, you're feeling anxious, you're depressed, or whatever is going on, you're angry, you're frustrated, you're irritable, and then you're just, whatever's in your space, you're just going to, kind of blow your steam at. It didn't matter whether that was your wife or whoever was there. That's what was going to happen. And so that person that's happening to is not because of them. It's because of actually the other person, really. So one of our therapists, Karen Tyrell in the area, she would give some of her patients a Q-tip, and they could hold it in their pocket. And the Q-tip reminds them, quit taking it personally. And so these little cute things that can actually be very helpful sometimes. People use rings, some people other instruments, that something tangible that can help ground you. So.
Yeah. So it sounds like the advice is to keep a tab on your emotional level, and then using that to healthily disengage if you or your partner are just really heated. And then it sounds like the other part of it is a bit of forgiveness, not taking it personally. Don't hold it against your partner. Don't, just constantly bring it up and like let it cool down as you re-engage. Cool. I think one of the themes for a lot of us who are parents is like around the kids in the relationship. And it seems like there's a lot, at least I noticed with my wife and I, now we have these 2 kids who are in a school, and, they need to be watched and they need to be cared for. Do you have anything extra to say on, when you negotiate and you meet with your partner, what to do about the kids, given that that's just, even for a single parent, is going to be a constant, source of extra like stress and frustration after a lot of time with them?
Is to lead off like you just led off right now is to recognize the shared experience that the two of you are having. Like you want to start with that shared experience. It's sometimes can be very rewarding. Let's not just look at the negatives. There's probably some really beautiful moments that we're all having as well, where you really where things in some ways are chaotic in one area, but in another area it's like really simple and really more like we can get in touch with our values. So to kind of emphasize that as well. And when you're kind of bringing in, when you're both are tired and you're kind of negotiating and you're going to realize that, hey, I don't want to do it. Well, you do it. And that kind of thing is also recognizing, yeah, I know we're both tired. We're both, at times, it's just a really difficult job that we're doing here. We're trying to negotiate. Maybe one of us is working and the other one, or maybe both are working. Like, what are you going to do in that kind of situation? Is also to then first look at not like what you do and I do, but what can we do to optimize our environment to help us do this easier, make it easier on us. So that's why you come up like a team and you kind of look at it together, like rather than, all right, you do this, it's like immediately look at the challenge together and put our heads together when we're in that appropriate kind of level in that way. So I think that's a good starting spot. Where that lands is going to be, each one is going to be a little bit more individual than the other. And just recognizing if the energy gets a little bit too high, then let's say, well, let's take a time out. We'll come back at a certain time. And then obviously at that time, if you're now at a cooler level, we'll come back together. And it's going to be a lot of that. And when you come up with rules, you're going to be like, no, you just broke your rule. Be mindful. It takes a while for all of us to learn new behaviors. So you got to be like, if we see approximations, reward that. The one thing that we do that's really poor is that we will like, oh, it was really good that you took out the trash, but you forgot your plate over here. Don't do that. Don't combine two things like that. If you want to reward behaviors and get more of that, like if you see someone putting the trash away, just mention the trash. If they left their cup up there, wait another time, because when you do that, then that reward that you gave them was completely deleted by what you said afterwards, and it will not reinforce. In fact, that you're less likely to take out the trash in that particular instance. So when you're going to reward only. Don't reward and don't put both together. So that's a common error that you just kind of like learn to not do, and it will help you out and it'll help your partner out as well.
Yeah. And with the kids, look at it as a team and be positive about it. It's rare that we have this time with family. A lot of us have just so many demands with our work.
Absolutely.
So I guess on the other end of the spectrum, not personally in this, but a lot of people are alone. So like people who are single or just living on their own. What do you have like tips for just like managing the sort of feelings of loneliness or just feelings of isolation in this time when we're being told not to spend time with other people?
Yeah. The obvious ones would be is to do things like this on Zoom. As we mentioned last time, the neuroscience is pretty clear. When we see people's faces, when we have this synchronous sort of communication, like you and I are kind of looking at each other's facial expressions, our eyes are able to look at each other, that brings about a sense of connection, a sense of empathy. So the more you can do that, not just texting, not just doing that, but really emphasizing, getting yourself up, especially if you're starting to feel depression kick in because of that. That depression, for a lot of people who maybe never have had depression before, but they're isolated and feeling it, is not pathological. There is a reason why that's kicking in, because in our kind of built-in survival is that when we have this thing called the panic grief system. It's one of our 7 primal circuitries. This was work done by a guy by the name of Yak Pengsep. Wrote a really awesome book. I think it was called, like Affective Neuroscience. It was a very, very powerful book. And so it's built into all mammals. So what happens is that when we get separated from our tribes, we feel there's a panic signal. And that's why a lot of us felt that panic signal when we started to get the shelter in places and all these different orders to kind of confine our universes together. You start to feel that. And then afterwards, after that goes away, and then you're noticing the connection's not coming there. Well, what happens is that when we're in a panic mode, it's meant to vocalize so that it alerts that, hey, we're to our tribe, hey, I'm over here, find me. But if you keep vocalizing it or getting that panic signal and it's not being met, then the body reacts normally by shutting down. So your metabolism to shut down, for your whole body to shut down. So what it enabled us in the wild is that we would stay in one place, because where you were lost, the most likely place you'll be found is if you don't go running around searching, you just stay where you were lost. And also, and then shutting down your metabolism, literally going into a depressed state to slow it down, because you might not get food for a while. You're in a survival situation, and it allows your body, it's adaptive. Now, that being said, so you want to recognize that for those who never experienced depression before and are feeling it for the first time, that sinking kind of weighted feeling is a natural response. And then to do something about it is to be able to connect and come and use your play circuitry, which is another one of our 7 primary emotional circuitries espoused by Yak-Peng Sep, is the way to go through it, is to find out, okay, now here's my interesting situation. I'm in this sort of monastery by myself. Some of us are introverts, that can be a blessing, but those of us like myself who would be an extrovert, might be bouncing off the walls in such a situation, is that where, first of all, you want to continue your physical activity. And I would work out with other people on this medium, so that you guys are working, so you're doing something physical and connecting with each other on the medium together, so you can get the endorphin hit with the connection with someone else, stuff like that. You can do things too, depending upon the level of restrictions, where you could go out and meet with somebody using your distances, whether that's allowed in your particular area, but being out by a park and all that kind of stuff, and really having that structured out so you can look forward to it. It's when you don't have anything out, no meetings planned out, like where I'm going to meet with somebody, that it can start to feel that sinking feeling of kind of loneliness and sometimes hopelessness as well.
Yeah. So like physically meeting people, but making sure you're 6 feet or more apart and not involving groups, but still having like a lunch at a park type of thing.
Correct. With just like one other person that you can just really have a heart-to-heart with, and just have that combination if it's allowed in your particular area.
Yeah. And then I've noticed just from online relationships, like a lot of people that I wouldn't normally talk to online are reaching out, and I've had a lot of these conversations that maybe I haven't talked to the person in years. So I think a lot of us have these social networks that we can reach out to and connect with. And then your comment about like play reminds me of like one of the other follow-up questions here is like, how do you maintain camaraderie? So like, suppose you're out working with workers and maybe you have an essential job, or you're a first responder, and you're in this high stress environment where ordinarily you would be close to your colleagues, just as a way to get through the tough times. And now you need to be physically apart. How can these groups of people keep their spirits up?
Absolutely. And I love that question. That was a fantastic question. And so what we want to get back to is what brings people together. And so we know that it's called behavioral social synchrony is the neuroscientific term. And that is behaviors that happen in sync with each other. So they do these interesting experiments where they'll have, like, for instance, you'll be sitting at a desk with another person at another desk and another person at another desk. And some people will tap with you and some people will tap off your beat. And then they will have conversations and they'll rate like what their attitude is. And overall, what happens is those who tapped with you, though that was the only difference, you tend to like them more. So there's something about this synchronous behavior by getting into rhythm with each other where you can feel the connection. Oftentimes, obviously when a lot of the first responders, let's say you're at a bar and you're kind of like having all your buddies and friends are together and you're singing. What do? You might sing. What's singing? It's rhythm. You're getting into sync with one another. There's an entrainment. And in that entrainment, you lose this sort of isolated sense of self and you become part of the whole. You feel that greater connection, that camaraderie, that deep bond that lies between you guys. When people kind of go, they rock back and forth and all this kind of stuff. What is that? It's the natural rhythm in our bodies and how we express itself. So you can do that online, where you can set up groups where, oftentimes when I worked at the Veterans Hospital, they had like drumming groups. It's that primal drum, like beat and all that kind of stuff. What I recommend is like you could do like a song playlist where you guys can like combine the music entrainment with like with strong tribal rhythms. And I mean, a great song is like Queen's "We Will Rock You." And if I had it, I would do it right now. But you just imagine like you're just sitting there with each other. And you're like doom 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 and you just feel it after a while. You start, exactly. So look at, you're laughing
It
right
made me
now.
feel good just from doing that. Yeah.
Exactly. And you just start giggling and laughing, and you're letting energy go, and you're allowing yourself to just feel that making signals up with each other. What do people do when they're kind of doing this stuff like in sporting events and everything? All of that coming up with like different, we don't have handshakes, but you can certainly do synchronous sort of movements that just represent. It could get silly too. We don't have to take each other so damn seriously as well. Again, allowing yourself to have that little bit of play, because there's so much seriousness going on. We need the balance there. That's one of the reasons why when you miss that camaraderie, because you get to tease each other, you get to make fun of each other and that kind of thing. And so oftentimes that's what we call, that's part of that play. There's one of the things is what's really missing is what we call rough and tumble play, where we're able to wrestle each other. You ever wonder why it feels good to just wrestle and just like, why do we like that kind of thing? It's because it's primal. It's something inside of us. But we can wrestle with our language. We can wrestle with imitating our movements with each other. There's ways to do it from this kind of distancing. It just requires a little creativity and the willingness. You know what? Who cares? If you may be like some of the first responders, like, yeah, that's kind of not. That chance I'm going to start doing that kind of thing with some of my dudes and just start playing "We Will Rock You" and all that kind of stuff. But when you say that, feel your body when you say that. You'll notice that like you start to feel a little bit of like a smile on your face, maybe even a little bit of embarrassment. That's good. You're getting now blood flow to your face. It improves your complexion as well. So those kind of things, by being open to that, and you could do that even when you're about to leave. Maybe your ship leaves and you guys do this sort of like circle where you play and you do some sort of rhythm kind of going in like teams do. Think about it.
I really like the idea of getting drums, like just some like cans to bang on, and why not? I think would be really, really fun.
And maybe each say if it's a police, that they have their own they create their own song to each other. Like they have their own theme song, whether it's like a "We Will Rock You" or something like, like "Thunderstruck" or one of these other kind of like intense kind of things where you feel that, you're hitting your chest, you're bonding. Just want to make a note on that though. There's going to be a lot of energy and there's a lot of grief a lot of us are going to see. So oftentimes when we do those type of movements, when we're letting the energy go, going over those kind of things, laughing, crying, and shaking and shouting our dominant ways in which we release our emotional kind of I call it your emotional toxins that you built up for the day. So you might notice you're laughing and all of a sudden you cry. So people are not used to that. It's natural. That's actually a healthy thing, is to just let it go and just let it flow. And even you might notice it gets triggered in yourself. So let that flow. Trust me, the more you can let that flow and let that energy out, the less weight you're going to carry into the next day, and you'll stay fresh and you'll stay sharp.
Thanks, Michael. We're getting towards the end of things. I want to just hit on one last theme, and this one's a pretty big one, so I don't think we will cover it all today.
Okay.
This is around employment and how to deal with stress. So there's like a couple groups of people here. There are people who own or run businesses, and they have the stress of keeping that afloat and people employed.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also the essential workers, whether they're in healthcare field or they're just out and about in a time where they have real fear of getting sick or getting their loved ones sick through their jobs. So just like on a very high level, if you're feeling stress around your work at this time, how could you manage that? How can you get through that?
Yeah. Well, the number one thing here is pride needs to be let go of here. This is a situation that no one could, that really was just knocked us all off our feet. I think a lot of us feel like we're almost like inside a movie at this point. Like what the F is going on right now? That kind of feeling. And so it's just to realize there's no way we could have anticipated that as a restaurant owner, or if you're, working in as a first responder and you walk into the ICU and you're noticing things that you never thought you would see. These are all just very, very common. So we have to reach out. This is the time we need to connect. One of the things is I really recommend limiting how much we watch the political, to be quite honest with you, on both sides, the political bullshit, and get back to our basics. Let's come back. One of the hearts of at least in the United States was a kind of a sense of just connecting on a decentralized way where we can just really connect and form our strong bonds together. That we do value individuality, but this is a time to also use our individuality and our collective individualities together and reach out. So it's time to look out and look for that helping hand. It's not charity. It's absolutely something that's essential for you and the people that you may be taking care of. So I'd like to just stress is like, look for other ways. You need people to help you. People who are doing better are trying to lend help. Like the two of us right now, we're trying to use what we can to help other people. And there's a lot of that going on because it feels meaningful. You know, one of the things when, you know, I'm doing this for is because it just feels, you know, without other way to say it, but it just feels right in this particular situation. I'm just letting that energy express itself. You know, you probably are feeling the same way in many ways. And so there are people there to help and reach out as much as you can. There are resources. Keep looking, keep playing with the situation. Take a break when you need to. And you know, I think that's, again, just taking a very kind of quick glance at a very complex question, but reach out, reach out, reach out. That's how I would address it so far.
Okay, so let's close it up. Any final parting words? It's March 31st. I think we're still at the beginning stages of what's going to be a very long process.
Sure.
So any thoughts on how to win it in the long term, you know, how to stay healthy over a marathon?
Yeah. Sleep, number one. I mean, you go back to your basics. Let's go back to the basics really quick. Sleep. If you can, if your relationship's good, sex, it's healthy, it keeps you strong. It's really, you know, there's a vitality in that as well. Exercise, eating well, you know, taking care of your body. This is actually probably will not be, again, you know, things are changing all the time, the big one. But there's a likelihood that there's going to be other waves, whether it's this COVID-19 or something else. We're just so interconnected right now and things travel so fast. So this is kind of like boot camp. And so it's a really kind of a wake up call. Like you said, you let go of your, you know, drinking alcohol. To be quite honest with you, you know, I've let go of a lot of my own kind of self-maladaptive behavior because I felt a calling that I felt I needed to stay as healthy as I possibly could be in order to be, you know, strong. And I no longer drink alcohol myself. I used to like a little bit of wine here and there, you know, with a nice steak. But, you know, at this point, I really need to stay sharp. I need to be there. It's like, I don't know. There's something in that. I don't know. I don't have the words right now. Maybe you can find it, but there's something, it's like, I think sacrifice is probably too strong of a word, but there's something in like doing that in honor of something that you really value and letting that express through you. Then it's like, that becomes so minuscule and everything else just becomes so much more meaningful. So finding that everyday meaning in the life and our brain has a tendency to overvalue the negative things. It's called the negativity bias over the positive things. So when the positive things happen, and they are happening in all of us, even on the worst days, there's going to be times when it drops down and at times it goes up. Just soak in the positive, just for a couple of seconds, if possible, because that way it'll help balance out that natural negativity bias. And I'll just leave it at that. And one last thing, we will put some summaries on the bottom in our description because that was asked for by a couple people. So I'll try to put a couple of the like major points that we talked about in the description below.
Okay. Well, thanks, Michael. I think really enjoyed the conversation, and I definitely learned a lot from these. So I appreciate your time, and I'm having a lot of fun doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk again soon.
All right. I look forward to it, Jim. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Be safe. Be healthy.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.